David, I've been reflecting a lot about how crucial it is to think in English to improve speaking skills. Many learners seem stuck because they translate everything from their native language instead of thinking directly in English. What's your perspective on this?
Mia, I couldn't agree more. Thinking in English instead of translating is the foundation for fluent speaking. When you translate, it creates a mental barrier that slows down your speech and causes hesitation. The moment you start thinking directly in English, your ability to express yourself becomes more fluid and natural.
But switching your thought process isn't easy. How does one train their mind to think in English? It feels foreign, almost like learning a new way to process thoughts.
You're right, it's challenging at first. One effective method I found is to narrate daily activities in English mentally. For example, when I'm preparing breakfast, I say to myself, I am cutting the vegetables, or I'm boiling water. This constant internal narration helps develop an English mindset over time. Have you tried something like that?
Yes, I have, but at times it feels awkward, as if I'm talking to myself, which makes me hesitate.
That's a common feeling, but this private practice is actually one of the safest ways to build your fluency. It's a judgment-free zone where you can experiment and improve. Another approach is to label objects around you with their English names, so your brain starts associating the English word directly with the object. For example, when you see a window or chair, you immediately think the English word, bypassing translation.
I like that. I try to think in chunks too, like not just the word book, but the phrase I'm reading a book. It seems to help me form sentences faster.
Exactly, thinking in chunks or phrases is key. It mirrors how native speakers think. Instead of isolated words, your brain processes meaningful phrases, making it easier to construct sentences quickly. Plus, repeating common expressions in your mind, such as, how are you, or, what's your plan for today, builds automaticity and prepares you for real conversations.
Speaking of repetition, I also mentally rehearse answers to typical questions like what did you do yesterday, or what do you like to do in your free time? It helps me respond faster when someone asks me.
That's an excellent practice. Preparing and mentally answering common questions equips you with ready responses and builds your confidence. However, it's important to personalize your answers to avoid sounding robotic. Adding your own opinions or extra details turns memorized phrases into genuine conversation.
True, robotic speech is a concern. How can learners maintain naturalness while preparing answers?
I recommend using prepared phrases as a foundation but always customizing them. For instance, instead of, I like music, say, I really enjoy listening to jazz music in the evenings. This customization encourages genuine expression and keeps conversations engaging.
Another obstacle I face is fear of making mistakes when thinking and speaking in English. It sometimes paralyzes me.
That fear is common, but it's essential to reframe your mindset. Mistakes are not failures but stepping stones to improvement. When you focus on communicating your ideas clearly rather than grammatical perfection, you reduce anxiety. Embracing mistakes leads to faster learning and greater confidence.
I admire that mindset. I try to remind myself that mistakes show I'm learning, but it's not always easy.
It takes time and practice to adopt that attitude fully. Regular speaking practice, even if just talking to yourself, helps normalize errors. The more you speak, the less intimidating mistakes become.
Vocabulary limitations often slow down my thought process. What's your advice on improving vocabulary to support thinking in English?
Immersion is key. Surround yourself with English media, books, podcasts, movies, and expose yourself to words in context. When you encounter new words, write them down and use them actively in sentences or conversations soon after. This shifts vocabulary from passive recognition to active use, which is critical for thinking fluently.
I also use visualization to remember words better. Associating words with pictures or situations makes them stick.
Visual associations enhance memory by creating mental links. Grouping related words, like emotions or food items, also helps. For example, learning happy, joyful, and content together builds a network of synonyms that you can draw upon naturally.
How important is listening in developing the ability to think in English?
Listening plays a vital role. It trains your brain to recognize natural speech patterns, pronunciation, and vocabulary usage. The more you listen to native speakers, the more your brain adapts to English rhythm and intonation, facilitating quicker thinking and speaking.
I've been watching shows and podcasts without subtitles to challenge my comprehension, and it's really helped me think in English more smoothly.
That's excellent. Combining listening with shadowing exercises amplifies the effect. Shadowing involves immediately repeating what you hear, mimicking the speaker's tone and rhythm. It builds neural connections between hearing and speaking, accelerating fluency and thought processing.
I've done shadowing before, it's tough but rewarding. Repeating short clips repeatedly strengthens my pronunciation and thinking speed.
Regular shadowing, even for 10 minutes daily, can transform your speaking skills. It's a comprehensive workout for your listening, pronunciation, and cognitive processing all at once.
Writing also helped me. Journaling in English forces me to think and organize ideas in English rather than translating.
Writing is a fantastic complement to speaking practice. It strengthens your grammar and vocabulary internally, which later reflects in smoother oral expression. A daily journal, even if brief, enhances your ability to think clearly in English.
Lastly, how significant is mindset and motivation when learning to think in English?
Mindset is foundational. Staying positive and setting clear, achievable goals keeps you motivated. Learning to think in English takes time, so celebrating small wins and remaining patient are crucial. For example, mastering a 5-minute conversation or learning a set of phrases weekly can motivate you to continue.
Those are valuable insights, David. To summarize this part, what are your top 3 tips for learners wanting to start thinking in English today?
First, immerse yourself mentally by narrating daily activities in English. Second, practice shadowing to align your brain and mouth with English sounds. Third, don't fear mistakes, focus on communication and practice consistently.
David, shadowing really intrigued me. But some learners get overwhelmed trying to imitate native speakers perfectly. How can they ease into it without pressure?
Great question, Mia. I tell learners to focus on progress, not perfection. Start with short, simple sentences, maybe 10 to 20 seconds long. Listen carefully, then repeat aloud, mimicking pronunciation and intonation as best as you can. If you miss a word or sound, don't stress. Consistency and daily practice matter more than flawless imitation.
That's reassuring. Also, I think choosing content you enjoy keeps motivation high. If the topic interests you, repetition feels less like a chore.
Absolutely. Authentic materials like podcasts, TV shows, or interviews with natural speech patterns help learners internalize real conversational rhythms. It's better to shadow natural speech than scripted learner dialogues because it prepares you for real-life conversations.
Some learners struggle with difficult sounds that don't exist in their native language. What's the best way to tackle pronunciation issues during shadowing?
Focus on 1 or 2 tricky sounds at a time. Use pronunciation apps or YouTube tutorials to break down sounds. Slow down audio clips if necessary and practice those sounds alone before shadowing entire sentences. Over time, your mouth muscles adapt, and the new sounds become easier.
Moving beyond shadowing, what about thinking in English during live conversations? Many learners freeze when speaking with others, despite practicing alone.
That's where mindset and preparation play huge roles. Before a conversation, mentally rehearse some phrases or topics you feel comfortable with. Mindfulness techniques, like deep breathing, can help calm nerves. Remember, it's okay to pause or ask for clarification if needed. Preparation plus confidence reduces freezing.
Would you recommend practicing with native speakers or fellow learners?
Both have benefits. Native speakers offer authentic language and cultural insights. Peers can be more patient and empathetic since they share the learning experience. Language exchange apps and conversation clubs offer regular practice opportunities that build thinking and speaking skills.
What do you suggest learners do when they get stuck searching for the right word mid-sentence?
Using fillers like, "let me see," "actually," or, buys time without awkward silence. Paraphrasing is a great strategy too. If you forget umbrella, say, "the thing you use when it rains." This keeps conversations flowing and reduces pressure.
How can learners naturally improve vocabulary to support thinking in English?
Immersive reading and listening are key. Select topics you enjoy, highlight new words, then use those words in sentences or speaking practice soon after. Flashcard apps with spaced repetition help review vocabulary efficiently. The goal is active use, not just passive recognition.
What about expressing abstract ideas or emotions, which are harder to think about in English?
Start by learning useful phrases like, "I feel that," "in my opinion," or "it seems like." Pair these with simple vocabulary. Reflecting on your day or feelings through journaling also trains your brain to organize complex thoughts in English.
Journaling sounds very useful for deeper thinking practice. It forces organization of ideas in English, not translation.
Exactly. Writing helps solidify grammar and vocabulary internally, which makes spontaneous speaking easier later. Keeping a daily journal, even short entries, boosts your ability to think clearly in English.
Can you recommend mental exercises to increase English thinking speed?
Sure. Describe your surroundings silently in English whenever you're waiting or commuting. Play word association games, say a word and quickly think of related words in English. These simple daily exercises build mental agility and speed.
Watching English media helps too, right?
Definitely. Watching movies, TV shows, or YouTube videos exposes you to conversational English and cultural nuances. Try to watch without subtitles or only with English subtitles. Focus on understanding through context, then repeat key phrases aloud to train your speaking muscles.
Some learners rely too heavily on subtitles in their native language. Is that a problem?
Yes, it can be. I recommend transitioning gradually, from native language subtitles, to English subtitles, then no subtitles. This progression forces your brain to process English directly, improving thinking and listening skills.
What if learners still feel their thinking speed is slow after practice?
Patience is essential. The brain takes time to adapt. Keep practicing daily, focusing on fluency over perfection. Accept that pauses and mistakes are normal. Over time, your thinking speed in English will improve naturally.
How can learners integrate thinking in English into daily life?
Make it a habit. Plan your day in English in the morning, narrate tasks while cooking, review your day in English at night. Consistent use trains your brain to operate naturally in English.
Is it more beneficial to think silently or speak out loud when practicing?
Both are important. Silent thinking builds vocabulary and sentence structure internally, while speaking aloud links thought with physical speech production. Combining them accelerates fluency and confidence.
Finally, what advice would you give learners overwhelmed by the process?
Take it step by step. Celebrate small successes like thinking in English for 5 minutes or forming a full sentence without hesitation. Learning to think in a new language is a journey. Stay curious, patient, and persistent. You'll get there.
David, I've been thinking more about how learners can make thinking in English a natural habit rather than just a practice exercise. What daily habits do you recommend to truly internalize this way of thinking?
Great question, Mia. One of the most effective habits is to consistently engage with English throughout your day, not just during study time. For example, try to narrate your thoughts silently or aloud as you go about your routine, when you're commuting, cooking, or even waiting in line. This constant engagement builds mental pathways that make thinking in English automatic over time.
That makes sense. So instead of dedicating a fixed time, learners can embed English thinking into daily activities. How about using technology to support this habit?
Absolutely. Smartphones and apps offer wonderful tools. Using language apps with spaced repetition reminds you of vocabulary daily. Listening to podcasts during commutes, watching videos on topics you enjoy, and even setting your phone's interface to English can create immersive environments. The key is to expose yourself to English regularly and meaningfully.
I often find myself switching back to my native language, especially when tired or distracted. How can learners stay consistent in thinking in English despite these challenges?
That's a common obstacle. One strategy is to set small, realistic goals like, I'll think in English for 10 minutes this morning, or, I'll describe my lunch in English today. Gradually increasing these durations helps build stamina. Also, positive self-talk and reminding yourself of why you want to improve fuels motivation. Tracking progress with a journal or app can encourage consistency.
Speaking of journals, do you suggest learners write only, or also speak their journal entries aloud?
Both. Writing helps organize thoughts and build grammar skills, while speaking aloud connects your mental ideas to verbal expression. Try recording yourself reading journal entries to monitor pronunciation and fluency. This multimodal practice reinforces thinking and speaking connections.
How about reading? Can reading regularly help improve the ability to think in English?
Definitely. Reading exposes you to sentence structures, vocabulary, and idiomatic expressions in context, which deepens your understanding. Start with materials at your level, graded readers, short stories, or articles on familiar topics. Annotate or highlight new words, then try to use them in your own sentences.
I sometimes struggle to guess word meanings from context. Should learners look up every unknown word?
Not necessarily. Guessing meaning from context is a valuable skill that trains your brain to think in English. For crucial words, looking them up is important, but over-reliance on dictionaries can interrupt flow. I recommend noting unfamiliar words and reviewing them later to maintain reading fluency while still expanding vocabulary.
Can you share some strategies to improve thinking speed when forming sentences?
Sure. Practicing common sentence patterns helps your brain retrieve structures quickly. For instance, rehearse forming sentences in different tenses or using conditional phrases regularly. Role-playing common situations or using conversation prompts to speak spontaneously can boost thinking speed.
What about thinking ahead in conversations? How can learners anticipate what to say next without hesitation?
Anticipation comes from experience and preparation. Familiarize yourself with common topics and typical questions. Practice mentally planning your responses during pauses. Using fillers like, let me think, or, that's a good question, gives you time to formulate answers without silence.
Sometimes learners worry their accent or pronunciation holds them back from thinking freely in English. How can they improve pronunciation without getting stuck?
Focus on clarity over perfection. Native speakers appreciate clear communication more than flawless accent. Listen carefully to English sounds and imitate them regularly. Use apps that provide pronunciation feedback and practice troublesome sounds slowly before speeding up. Shadowing helps train your mouth to produce sounds naturally.
You mentioned shadowing a lot. Can you suggest how to select good materials for shadowing practice?
Choose materials that interest you and suit your level, podcasts, TED Talks, interviews, or TV shows. Start with short, clear sentences. Use transcripts to follow along. Gradually increase difficulty as you gain confidence. Remember, consistency matters more than intensity.
How important is mindset for thinking in English and speaking fluently?
Mindset is everything. A positive, growth-oriented attitude helps you embrace challenges and learn from mistakes. Visualize success and set realistic goals. When you think, I'm improving every day, you fuel motivation and resilience, which directly impacts your ability to think and speak English confidently.
What advice would you give to learners who feel frustrated with slow progress?
Patience and persistence are key. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Celebrate small wins, like understanding a conversation or speaking for a few minutes without hesitation. Keep a progress journal to visualize growth. Taking breaks when needed helps prevent burnout and keeps you fresh.
How do you recommend learners practice thinking in English under pressure, like during exams or public speaking?
Simulate pressure situations in practice. Record yourself answering questions or giving short talks. Practice deep breathing and mindfulness to manage anxiety. Familiarity with common exam topics or presentation themes also builds confidence. Remember, preparation reduces stress and improves performance.
Can you explain how thinking in English affects listening comprehension?
When you think in English, you're more prepared to process meaning instantly, which speeds up understanding. Your brain anticipates vocabulary and grammar, making it easier to catch details and nuances. This synergy between thinking and listening accelerates overall fluency.
How can learners link reading, listening, speaking, and thinking practices for maximum effect?
Integrate these skills daily. For example, read an article, listen to a related podcast, then summarize the content aloud in your own words. This reinforces vocabulary and grammar from multiple angles and strengthens thinking in English holistically.
Finally, what would be your biggest encouragement for learners struggling to think in English?
Don't give up. The process is gradual but rewarding. Each effort brings you closer to fluency. Surround yourself with English, embrace mistakes as growth opportunities, and enjoy the journey of learning. Thinking in English will become natural with time and dedication.
I'd like to explore how learners can maintain motivation during long learning journeys. Thinking in English consistently can feel exhausting or repetitive. What strategies do you suggest?
That's a vital topic, Mia. Motivation often fluctuates, so setting clear, achievable goals is essential. Break your language learning into manageable chunks, like learning 5 new phrases a day or thinking in English for 10 minutes each morning. Celebrate these small wins to keep the process rewarding. Also, vary your practice methods to avoid boredom, combine reading, listening, speaking, and writing.
Variety definitely helps keep things fresh. I find that engaging with topics I'm passionate about, like travel or cooking, makes thinking in English more enjoyable and less of a chore.
Absolutely. When you connect language learning to your interests, it becomes intrinsically motivating. Watching English videos about your hobbies or reading related articles deepens vocabulary in meaningful contexts, which also helps your brain associate English with positive experiences.
How can learners build a support system to stay motivated and accountable?
Joining language communities, both online and offline, is powerful. Conversation clubs, forums, or social media groups provide interaction and encouragement. Having a language partner to practice thinking and speaking in English with can boost confidence and create a sense of accountability.
Do you recommend tracking progress? How should learners do it effectively?
Yes, tracking progress is motivating because it makes improvement visible. Keep a journal or use apps to log new vocabulary, phrases, or time spent thinking in English. Recording yourself speaking regularly and listening back highlights areas of growth and points for improvement. These records can inspire learners to continue.
Sometimes learners get stuck in a plateau phase where progress feels slow. How can they overcome this?
Plateaus are natural in language learning. To push through, try changing your routine. Challenge yourself with new types of content, increase your speaking time, or practice public speaking. Setting fresh, slightly harder goals reignites motivation and pushes your skills forward.
Anxiety is another barrier. Thinking in English under stress can be daunting, especially in real conversations. What techniques help manage this?
Mindfulness and breathing exercises before speaking reduce stress. Visualizing successful conversations builds confidence. Preparing set phrases for common situations gives security. Most importantly, remind yourself that pauses and minor mistakes are normal, they don't define your ability.
Could you share a personal story about a time you struggled with thinking in English but overcame it?
Sure. Early in my English journey, I was terrified to speak because I kept translating in my head and stumbling. One day, I challenged myself to describe everything I did in English all day without switching back. It was exhausting, but after a week, I noticed my thoughts started flowing directly in English. That breakthrough motivated me to keep practicing daily.
That's inspiring. It shows how consistent mental practice transforms speaking ability. Before we wrap up, what final advice would you give to learners about thinking in English?
Embrace the process fully. Thinking in English is not an overnight change, it's a habit developed with time and patience. Practice regularly, use varied methods, be kind to yourself when mistakes happen, and keep your goals clear. The more you immerse your mind in English, the more natural it will become.
Thank you, David. This has been an enlightening conversation. I hope our listeners feel encouraged to start thinking in English and see it as a path to fluency.
Thank you, Mia. Remember, every step toward thinking in English is a step toward confident speaking. Keep practicing, stay curious, and enjoy the journey. Your fluency is waiting on the other side of consistent effort.
Absolutely. Let's keep inspiring learners to make thinking in English a daily habit.
Definitely. Looking forward to our next discussion.